Now, there's various reasons why end users of the financial statements may want to rely on audited statements. If you think about suppliers, customers, they have their own uses for financial statements of a company. For instance, suppliers might be selling a business goods on credit, so they want to be assured that the company has adequate cash reserves or assets to be able to pay them back in the future. So they rely on the work of auditors and these audited financial statements to get that assurance that, yes, in fact, this company does have those resources to pay them back in time. Customers, kind of a similar idea flipped around, but a customer wants to make sure that the company is maybe going to be around for a while. So if you're buying steel off USX Corporation, for instance, maybe you're an automaker and you have a contract with them, you want to be able to make sure that they can fulfill their end of that obligation. So if you look at their audited financial statements, you can see what their financial position is and kind of gives you an idea if they're still going to be around in the future. Obviously, lenders, bondholders, they have a vested interest in the company not going bankrupt. So if you're thinking about investing in a company as well, you're relying on those audited financial statements to make decisions. So the work that auditors put in to give us that reasonable assurance is really important for different groups for various reasons. So we also want to think about exactly why they have to rely on auditors. For instance, why do those suppliers or customers, why can't they just kind of get this information themselves? And there's a number of reasons. One key one is remoteness. You might have an investor halfway around the world making an investment in a company, so they're not there physically to see what's going on. So when we talk about the audit of fixed asset accounts, for instance, auditors will go out and make sure companies actually have and own the assets they say that they have possession of on the balance sheet. So if you live halfway around the world, kind of would be hard for you to do that on your own. So you're relying on the auditors to kind of do a double check of those fixed assets. Also, this idea of complexity. If you're an investor, if you're a lender, customer, supplier, you might not necessarily be an expert in accounting. So you're relying on CPAs who do have that expertise, right, to oversee these financial statements to make sure they're properly prepared. And we have this idea of competing interest. Basically, management's interests aren't always necessarily aligned with other parties. So the auditors go into the audit with an open mind, and basically they can kind of take anything management has to say with a grain of salt and really apply what we call professional skepticism to the audit process. So all these factors kind of help us have more reliable financial statements that these end users can feel like they can make good decisions based off of. Now, we want to talk a little bit about the different responsibilities, both for the auditors themselves and also for the individuals that prepare the financial statement. So first off, let's think about the responsibilities of the people working within the company, the accountants actually preparing the financial statements, the managers overseeing the preparation of the financial statements. It's their responsibility to make sure that these financial statements comply with that applicable reporting framework, typically GAAP in the United States. And also it's management's responsibility to design and implement effective internal controls. So the auditor is going to oversee to make sure these things were done correctly, but it's ultimately the management's responsibility for preparing this information that the auditors are going to oversee. Also, it's management's responsibility to provide the auditors basically with anything they need to conduct the audit. So sometimes this is a source of friction between auditors and their clients, right? The client is paying the auditor to conduct the audit. So if maybe they're withholding information or don't want to go to the trouble of giving the auditors everything they need, this can kind of create problems. I've seen this on the job, not necessarily that my employers were trying to withhold information from auditors, but in some cases the auditors were asking for information which my managers maybe didn't think they necessarily needed, or was kind of a pain in the butt to dig up the information. So you kind of have that friction, but ultimately it's the responsibility of managers to provide the auditors with anything they need to conduct their job. We'll talk later on in the class about what happens when that kind of breaks down and management refuses to provide auditors with what they need. And in some cases, the auditor is going to withhold an opinion on the financial statements because they just don't have the information necessary to make a good opinion on the financial statements. So those were management's responsibilities. On the other hand, the responsibilities of the auditor is to conduct the audit in accordance with auditing standards. We're going to talk later in this chapter about auditing standards and start to delve into what those standards look like. So just like we have GAAP that is followed by accountants when preparing the financial statements, we have generally accepted auditing standards that need to be followed by auditors when they're actually auditing the financial statements. And I brought up this term earlier, professional skepticism. For any of you who are planning on taking the CPA exam, this might be something to really take note of. I see quite often questions come up on the CPA exam in regards to professional skepticism. And basically this is just meaning that the auditor has a critical mind, an open mind. Of course, they're being paid by the company they're auditing, but they have to keep in mind that maybe the company made mistakes, possibly the company committed fraud. So even though this is their client, they have to be skeptical of the work that went into preparing those financial statements so they can have an open mind when they're actually conducting the audit. And also the auditor is responsible for exercising professional judgment, basically meaning all the experience and knowledge they gained over the years is going to be applied when they're undertaking the audit. So there's a bunch of different skills that go into practicing audit. A lot of you at this point in your accounting career have picked up on a lot of the basic skills on how to prepare financial statements. Maybe you've taken various classes in accounting theory and so forth. And as you work as an auditor, over time, you're going to build up greater and greater skills. This class is part of that, learning the basics of audit. The practice of audit, if you actually go and eventually work as an auditor, you're going to pick up more and more experience. And over time, you're going to apply that to help your firm conduct better audits. And one key thing that we're going to focus on in this course is data analytics, which is becoming really a bigger part of the auditor's toolkit, actually kind of using information, using IT tools to process information to more accurately conduct their audits. We have here a framework that we're going to come back to throughout the course for how audit decisions are made by the auditor. So this is kind of a general framework of 5 steps that auditors use to draw a conclusion. So think of an example where an auditor is kind of overseeing the cash account. So this is a big area of interest for auditors. Obviously, a lot of fraud can revolve around the cash account. So imagine we're responsible for auditing the cash account for a company. Kind of the thought process that we'd go through is step 1, obtaining company background. So we'd want to know, how they receive cash. We want to know about all the different bank accounts that the company has. We want to know about petty cash being held on hand. Then step 2, what's the audit problem we're trying to solve? In this case, we want to make sure that the problem is cash accurately being reported on the balance sheet? All right, so step 3, we gather information and evidence. So in the case of auditing a cash account, you might want to go out and get bank account statements, bank reconciliations that have been worked through by the internal accountants within the company when they produce their financial statements. Then step number 4, you want to perform an analysis. Now, an auditor might not totally recreate every bank reconciliation, but they're going to test some of the bank reconciliations to make sure they were accurately performed. Then step number 5, you draw a conclusion. Basically, hopefully, that typically it's going to be that the cash account was accurately compiled and the numbers shown up on the balance sheet are accurate. But if that's not the case, you might have another conclusion, and then you got to think about, well, if there are any mistakes or potential instances of fraud, is this material? Will this affect the end users of the financial statement?